Well, hello, this is Mark Galeotti of the Institute of International Relations, Prague, and I'm speaking to you on the day after the French presidential elections, which saw Marine Le Pen roundly trounced, and with it, Russia's chances of truly getting a split within the European Union. It's clear that the Russians were very much trying to support Le Pen, not just financially, but also in terms of their 11th hour dump of largely fake documents about Macron, the victorious candidate. And it raises the question of actually just how effective Russia's campaign of political manipulation and subversion in the West really has been. Now, the answer to that is, of course, ambiguous. What do you expect when you ask an academic a straight answer? On the one level, they've actually been astonishingly unsuccessful. They wanted, for example, the right-wing candidate Norbert Hofer in last year's Austrian general elections. What did they get for president? The Green. They wanted clearly to ensure that Le Pen would win, because that truly would be a game changer, as I said, within the European Union. They've got Macron, a candidate who very much sort of has dedicated himself to restoring the sort of connections within French society and maintaining the links between France and the rest of the European Union. They were at least supporting, in terms of media push through RT and such like, Scottish independence. That was voted out. They were supportive of Brexit, but there's no actual evidence that their RT and so forth had any real impact on that particular vote. And perhaps most importantly of all, they didn't really expect or want Trump to win the American presidency, in my opinion. Certainly the people I spoke to in Moscow at the time and more recently didn't really see that as being Russia's game plan. And in fact, I was in Moscow when the American cruise missile attack against Syria took place following the chemical weapons strike. And it's clear that their every nightmare about Trump was coming to light, that they had a president who was hard to predict, who had no real policy that they could use as a basis for identifying America's red lines, and who had a very low threshold for the use of military force. So on one level, one could say they've actually been phenomenally unsuccessful. And yes, this is true in terms of their capacity to actually manipulate the results of elections. However, that's not quite the full story, and in this I want to bring up two Ds. One is disruption and one is dark power. In many ways, the Russians' intent is not specifically to win elections in certain ways, though obviously they wouldn't be opposed to it if they could. It's more to actually maximise the disruption within societies as a process. Again, let's take the American example. Everyone, I think, in Moscow believed that Hillary Clinton was guaranteed to win the presidential election for a whole variety of reasons. They were scared of that. They wanted to do what they could to ensure that when she came to power, she would already be facing a whole series of challenges to her legitimacy, problems within her own democratic base and so forth. And that was really why they carried out the election hack, or they had the hack of documents and then the release to influence the election. It was to weaken a Clinton presidency rather than to elevate a Trump one. Likewise, if one looks at what's going on in Europe, on the one level, yes, they've been very unsuccessful in actually winning elections, but on the other hand, what they have done is often been able to increase the degree of acrimony, increase the degree of divisiveness. I mean, even if one looks at the French poll, 1/3 of the electorate were willing to support Marine Le Pen, who probably, it's fair to say, was indeed a sort of the Russian poster child if they had to pick a candidate. But nonetheless, Marine Le Pen is very much committed to hostility towards the migrant community, towards getting out of the European Union. I mean, all causes that are actually very sort of close to Moscow's heart. And the very fact that there's 1/3 who are willing to support her implies that there's certainly going to be some strong divisions within French society with which Macron will have to grapple. So too, more generally, what the Russians are looking for is disruption more than anything else. They want to ensure that Europe is just so occupied with its own internal divisions between and within states. In this respect, Brexit is brilliant for them. That in some ways it prevents Europe from being any kind of meaningful actor, in particular in terms of preventing Russia from doing what it wants in its own backyard, places like Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia, maybe, we'll have to wait and see. That's where Russia really feels it needs to have autonomy and flexibility, and if Europe can be just too busy with its own disputes, that's all to the good. So that's the D, disruption. Then there's the other D, dark power. In some ways, Putin, I think, has largely given up on the thought of being able to win much soft power. In other words, soft power is the capacity to make other countries your friend, to make them want to do things because precisely they want to be in your gang. That, I think, ship has long since sailed. So instead, something that the Russians are trying to develop doesn't really have a formal name. It's the opposite of soft power, but hard power has been taken. So I've been calling it dark power, which, to put it bluntly, is if you are a bully and a bastard, you want to be a good bully and a bastard. You want people to fear you. You want people to want to have reasons to buy you off. And I think this is actually part of the strength of the Russian campaign. On one level, absolutely, it has focused attention on Russian manipulation. It has focused attention on the essentially aggressive political war that Moscow is fighting against the West and Europe in particular. And yes, that has meant that there has been much more effort made to sort of building up NATO, putting money into often fairly pointless counter-disinformation campaigns and such like. But on the other hand, it definitely has elevated Russia into the status of, in its own way, a great power. This has been Putin's strength. In some ways, he's like one of these animals that puffs itself up to a much greater size, precisely to scare predators and rivals. Well, likewise, the more Russia can make it look like a threat to our whole way of life, the more there are some who are going to say, we need to make some kind of a deal with Putin. At the very least, people will think, Putin is a powerful player. Putin deserves to have some kind of voice at top-table discussions on important matters. So, on one level, the Russian subversion campaign is clearly failing. But on a deeper level, unfortunately, even in failing, it can be successful. And Putin is undoubtedly encouraging the natural divisiveness and division that is anyway currently taking place across the West as it grapples with a generalized crisis of legitimacy, and at the same time building up his dark power stocks, making him in some ways into precisely the kind of Bond villain that we therefore feel we need to make central to our own planning and perhaps also strike a deal with. Thank you very much.